Ladies and gentlemen, Kirk Thatcher and Darren Doctorman, the Weirded Beardos. Welcome to another edition of the Weirded Beardos. Yes, we're continuing from last week's episode with the illustrious Van Ling, who is, I think, a fifth done with his history. So this.
I'm a fifth.
Oh, you want me to do the short version? Okay.
We only have an hour, Van.
Declaration of War, the short form.
You don't have to do it in real time.
We had a great time last week, moments ago, talking about Van's rise to fame and fortune with he just finished winning first prize at a costume contest in Glendale with his power loader suit that the afternoon before he had shown to Gail Ann Hurd in their office at Fox. And we're going to pick that up right now and see what happened next, Van.
Oh, okay. Well, essentially nothing. Took the power loader home, stuck it in the garage, and this big Halloween costume made of styrofoam and foam core and wood and whatever, and went back to trying to figure out what I was going to do for work. And actually, we went on a family vacation, my parents, and when I came back, there was a message on the answer machine that said, "This is Jim Cameron. I heard you built a power loader worthy of note, and I'd like to see it. Give me a call so I can come by." So 2 weeks later, he comes by in his black Corvette, and I'm sitting there working on the set for a student film for a friend of mine, Rob McFarlane, who you may or may not have spoken to, but he was doing a directing class still in because he was in the grad school, and so he wanted me to build him this set that was like a version of the Discovery pod cockpit from 2001, because he was, he needed it for a directing piece he was doing about a gay swim coach. And so I was building this thing, in my parents' study, when Jim Cameron comes over and he sees me cutting foam core, and he goes, "Hey, you know how to do this?" He gets on the floor with me and starts showing me how to do certain kinds of foam core cuts and stuff. He's helping me build this thing, and we got to talking and we hit it off. And he also looked up and saw that I had a Macintosh, because that's something I had gotten as a present for my parents for actually making it through school or something like that. And he was asking me about it, and I told him, and he said, "You want to be my computer consultant?" Because kid out of college knows this stuff, why not? And also because I could still get a student discount. But there was the point is,
you couldn't at that time because you had graduated. Oh,
you're right.
Guess whose student discount he did use? Mine.
Yeah.
Which was hilarious.
So I walk on the back of giants. I stand on the back of giants. So, but we got to talking, and he saw I had a bunch of models, and I was into science fiction, and I knew the movie stuff, and I had gone to film school and all that kind of stuff. And he saw that I was really into research and that I was academically inclined. I was an honor student, all that kind of stuff. And so 2 weeks after that, he calls me and says, "Do you want to?" I'm working on a new movie called The Abyss, and it's scientific research, fluid breathing, underwater habitats, military. Would you be interested in doing that? I said, sure. So that's how I started as his researcher, and worked my way up to being basically the head of the production department at Lightstorm by the time I left 8 years later. Wow. So,
but among this was the time that I started working on stuff with you seriously. And Jim gave you the assignment of fixing the miniature power loader puppet.
This is true.
The miniature what?
Power loader puppet.
Oh, yeah.
that was destroyed in filming.
Yeah, the scale
The
one,
Doug Beswick cable controlled puppet that basically for the last shot where you see it tumble out of the airlock, they basically took the camera up, pointed down 30 feet down the ceiling, put black duve down there, and just
gravity gag.
yeah. So
it ripped right through the duvetine.
Yeah,
hit the floor,
hit the concrete floor of the stage,
Yeah.
and then they had to do a second take, so they had to rebuild the pieces that were shattered and whatever, and they would get that, and then and it was basically in a box.
Yeah.
And Jim hands me this box and says, you think you guys fix this up since you're the power loader guy now. So we have to start working on that.
So wait, so roll back for a second. He goes to your parents' house where you're building, and just to meet you.
Yeah, and to see the power loader.
Right, and to see the power loader.
And he sees it. Goes, this part isn't quite right, but that's pretty impressive.
That's amazing that he would drive to, just go to your house. I mean,
that is amazing.
I want to kind of grill you about Jim Cameron, but finish with your story. But well, no, because between you and Lou Zudavern and other people I know who worked with him, there sort of seems to be two sides, like the guy on set versus the guy that goes to your house and sits on the floor. And I always respected him because he's not a trust fund kid. He's not a kid who, born into the industry and really knows his shit, an amazing artist and storyteller. But you hear this kind of duality of him on set screaming and yelling.
Absolutely is.
And then the nicest guy who appreciates artists and craftsmen. And, so I want to talk to you about that, but I'm sorry. Go ahead with your story. So yes.
Which story were we doing now?
You were saying that you became head of White Storm production, but rebuilding the miniature.
Yeah, back then I was just this kid who was basically his assistant, but he was very clear to point out, you're not my executive assistant like the guy who takes care of my dry cleaning or anything like that. You're my research guy, you're my technical guy, you're my computer consultant guy, and
very
I can actually talk to you about these kind of things.
Yeah.
And so that was that process, and we rebuilt the power loader miniature, and Darren was there helping and making that stuff happen. And we tried to build it so that we could actually run the cables to make the things move, and we kind of had that working.
It worked pretty well. I mean, it was hard to pull the levers, but it worked.
Yeah, I'm mechanically inclined. I'm not necessarily mechanically minded, but when we built this thing, we put it on a stand and we brought it up there. And I remember driving it up in my car.
Yeah, I was holding it so it wouldn't
wouldn't fall over and break again. And we stopped at a KFC for lunch. Do you remember that?
And it probably had Chicken Littles back when they were good.
Yeah, and Kentucky Nuggets when they were still around and good.
Oh my goodness!
And they, we stopped there, and there was these guys who were walking by the parking lot, looking in our car at this thing, and they were like these trucker guys, like the kinds who would actually use Caterpillar products.
Right.
And I remember when we went back out, and we saw them walking away from the car, going, "Damn thing will just fall right over on its ass because somebody asked what it was, and didn't we say, oh, it was a prototype?"
Right.
And because obviously they hadn't seen the movie or recognized it from the movie,
right.
So that was hilarious. And we brought it up there. Jim was very happy with it. I have pictures of him posing on his Jeep with it.
Yeah, he's sitting on he was sitting on the front of the Jeep with it next to him, and he looked very happy.
Yeah, so we were all good with all that, and I ended up, because this is what I was brought up to do, was I brought Darren and Ed Marsh with me when we went to do The Abyss, and or at least gave them the opportunity to impress Jim.
Well, you got me the opportunity to work in the art department in LA, and that was pretty great because you said, well, we need someone to come in and help make some study models, and I said, well, I can do that, not knowing if I could do that at all. And
that's the first rule of film school.
That's
Always
right.
say
Always
you can do it.
yes.
Say yes.
Yeah.
And acting. You know how to ride a horse? Of course I do.
Of course. Yeah. Of
You
course.
shoot a gun? Yep. I grew up shooting guns and riding horses.
Yep.
Who else? Just a quick side. Who else was in the art department at that time? Like, who were you working with, or who did you end up working with?
There was I don't know, people that people might not have known about, a guy named Ron Cobb.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Oh, that's what I was saying. I mean, you might want to mention some of the.
Yeah. No, it was amazing. Les Dilley, who I sort of had heard about before, was the production designer, and of course he was the art director on so many amazing films that I grew up with. He came in one day, and I was there just messing with foam core and same crap that we always did. And Ron Cobb, John Bruno, who was the visual effects supervisor, and a guy named Phil Norwood, who Kirk, you knew, who was storyboarding the whole thing, and Steve Berg, who was sort of Ron's right hand, and it was extremely small. We were in a couple offices next to accounts receivable at Fox.
Yeah, we kind of spilled over into some of the other unused offices, and Jim was like, "Hey, you got to clean this up with foam core and all this stuff, you know." It's not,
and we brought down a friend of ours from up San Francisco, John Bell, not the one from ILM, but another guy who was a talented amateur. And
Atari ST guy. He actually did do a stint at ILM. He got fired for accidentally sending a model of a digital model of an X-wing to a vendor for Lucas Games without authorization, because they had asked for it. They were working on the project. They needed the thing, and he just said, "Okay, I guess you guys are legit." And they were legit, but he broke protocol and ended up getting kicked for it. He was the Atari ST guy, as I recall.
Yeah, he wrote for was it Antic magazine, something like that?
Something like that.
Atari ST. He was very into computers and computer graphics, and he still is.
They've done well.
He was like best friends with Tom Hudson, who was very involved in creating what is now
the Hudson Brothers show.
The Hudson Brothers Razzle Dazzle show.
Razzle Dazzle show, yeah.
Okay, we just showed our age.
Yeah.
And Emu.
And Emu.
You're right. Oh my goodness. Anyway, but we brought him down for a couple weeks, and we built this model of the containment.
The nuclear reactor containment vessel at Gaffney, South Carolina's unfinished nuclear power plant.
Or a shooting model for him to figure out how to use.
Yeah.
I know he's. I know he's very big on that. Lou built a shooting model of the sunken Titanic so he could figure out where he wanted to. He's amazing.
Study model. Yeah.
Study model. Study model.
Yeah, his study models though are pretty much on the level of other people's finished models.
Yeah, I know exactly. I've seen pictures.
We were just goofing around. We didn't really know what we were doing, but it made it just enough.
So he could figure out where to put the sets or how to fit them in the.
So he could figure out how to place the sets and how to shoot it when they were there.
Right. Was he? In other words, he was uncomfortable with 2D like blueprints, or he really? Because I worked with a director who could not visualize 3D space and needed study models, but that doesn't. I mean, it seems like Cameron is very visual.
No, he was completely comfortable with 2D.
Yeah, that's okay.
Plans and elevations.
Frankly, the
it's to show other people.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Because they can look at blueprints and only see.
Yes.
Their thinking is two-dimensional.
Yes.
And you know, he wanted to
Yeah.
literally be able to have, you know, we got these little lipstick cameras,
Yeah. No,
and we're using them, and there's footage somewhere of us at DreamQuest where we built all these giant, you know, butcher paper, you know, models of the sunken Montana, and we
right.
had little foam core models on sticks with,
Yeah.
you know, Jim had me go out and buy a whole ton of Pelican underwater flashlights that,
Mm,
you know, these little tiny things, the
yeah.
size of pens, these pen
Yeah.
flashlights that were super bright, and that we could clip onto these models and fill
Right.
the room with smoke and
Yeah.
do the whole thing to kind of
Like
do the videomatics.
we did the speeder bike chase on Jedi with that
Yeah.
with GI Joes,
Yeah,
and we had models of the
yeah,
bikes, and it's yeah, that's okay, cool, because that makes more sense. It's also shorthand for, like you said, the visually unimaginative, where you're like,
Yeah.
no, this is where it goes, and
Yeah,
this is where
because, you know, Coffee looked and he saw Russians. You
yeah.
have to look with better eyes than that.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's always the challenge as a director, trying to get your vision across.
oh god, yeah,
And if you have it where, you know, some directors are very fast and loose. They're like, you know, this is the general direction I want to shoot this. And
yeah,
there's others who are very meticulous because they're either planning out shots
right,
that have timings and have they're
right,
choreographed like dances.
right,
Um, or, you know, they just have an idea of how they want to do it. They're very specific of what they want to do. And some of them are like, this is what I kind of want to do. If we can get it, that's great. If not, we'll work with it. You know, that's level one for Jim. Level
right,
two is I have a very specific thing that
right,
I'm trying to do, and I'm going to keep doing it until I figure out how to do this, because that's what I'm trying to do.
right,
I'm, you know, you don't want to put out, if you're a cook or a chef, you don't want to put out your dish kind of, oh yeah, this stuff's a day older than I'd like it, but you know, it should be okay. You know, if you're having to say it should be okay with every step,
right,
then the whole thing is mediocre.
right,
And
right.
it's, you know, so Jim is very meticulous to get it out there because he knows the film is going to represent him
Well,
in
Fincher
terms
is the
of what he's
same
trying to do.
way.
Yeah.
David
Yeah.
Fincher's really like you said, so many of his shots are not just like, oh, the actors will be there and we'll look at it. It's not Gary
Yeah.
Marshall. You do the thing over here. We put the camera there, and it's shit.
Yeah.
You do it great. I mean, that works for rom-coms, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, he has something very specific he's trying to do, and it's not every shot is in and of itself, whatever it is, and it has to flow into something else. You know, there's a lot of storytelling components, and it's the same way because when you write, you have to do the same thing.
right.
You can make it work without a lot of things, but when it has connections, when
Yeah,
there are callbacks, when there are framings that set up a particular thing, and that you can do it as a rhyming shot later, all of those things are important, and you can tell stories without them, but you can also integrate them in and make things more compelling and more seamless and more just emotional if
yeah,
you know, and that's what's really interesting about it. He's known as this technical guy. He's known as this really tough guy to work with and everything.
right,
The only time he's a tough guy to work with is if you're not trying to work, at least trying to work at his level, not his level, but at his intensity. He
right,
wants you to care. He only wants you to care about the show as much as he does,
right,
especially since, you know, you're being paid to do that. You
right.
know,
Yeah,
and
yeah. No, I get it, but that's the disparity, like that
yeah,
I've heard.
yeah.
Yeah,
But it's not like there's this. You know, we always joked about Jim and Midge. You know,
Right.
Mij, as being kind of the polar opposites that you run into, and it's like,
yeah,
well, is he this Jim or Midge today? And
yeah,
I never really bought into that because I've known him as somebody who, you know, he has a threshold of how much bullshit he'll put up with, you
right.
know, and he'll flip. And do you remember? I don't know if you probably weren't there because you were working in the art department at the time. We were shooting with a deep suit, and Michael Hood, you remember, who built the deep suit.
Yep.
And there was this whole thing about, you know, we were filming the stuff where Ed's wearing the suit and it's got the liquid in it,
Yeah,
and he's got the things on the side which actually pull out so it can drain, and it's also got to have a neck dam that holds the water in, and he's got to pretend like he's breathing, and it's always a question of we got to get Ed into this and then make sure he's okay, and then we can roll camera, and then when we're done, we have to,
how
and there's
fast
this
can we get him out of it so that
how
he can
fast we
actually
get him
breathe?
out of it, because he's holding his breath.
Yeah.
To and pretending to breathe. You know, it's like to try to, you're not, you have to go, not just that, you have to underwater, because he's supposed to look like he's breathing.
Right.
So he has to have his mouth.
Yeah.
He has to have his mouth open. He has to be going to pretend like he's inhaling it. So he's got to pretend like he's inhaling without actually inhaling it.
Yeah.
You know, and so there are all these things, and the problem was always the suit was always leaking water.
Yeah.
And it was leaking water because the dressers were not putting it on quite right. And Michael was there trying to supervise these guys, and these guys were like putting it as far as they could, but they, you know, it's the kind where, you know, you put something in this way and it's locked, but if you put it in slightly off, it looks like it's in, it looks fine on camera, but it leaks. And so Jim was getting really pissed off because all his liquid was like dripping out. It's like, this is supposed to be a, you know, a military grade suit. Why is this? And he was like yelling on set because, you know, Ed Harris is getting kind of, you know, as you know, and Michael Hood finally snapped because Jim was just yelling, well, why is the suit ready? The suit's not ready to, you know, this guy's, you know, and Michael Hood finally said, if you would give us a moment to switch this thing here and let me do this, you know, this is, you know, he basically blew up at Jim, basically said, you know, you got to give us a moment to do this right so you can get the shots you want. And Jim stopped, blinked, looked at him, turned to the rest of the crew and said, now, if the rest of you had the balls that Mike just had in telling me this, we could get this movie done.
Wow. Well, respect. Like, all right, you know, just
what sets Jim off is either incompetence or lack of interest in doing your job well.
Right. Interesting.
Those are the things that make him crazy. He doesn't, you know, get angry for no reason. He's not capricious in that way, although it sometimes seems that way. Most of the people who feel that way it's because they don't want to admit to themselves that they either got lazy or they misunderstood something or they, you know, they weren't taking as seriously as he does, because from his standpoint, listen, we're all here to do the same thing. It's kind of like in a war. If you've got one guy who's lazy and lets the enemy past, then you're all dead.
Well, it's funny because I know two other directors personally, good friends, who have kind of the same reputation. Like, I know them, coolest, funniest guys, and then you hear on set, like, oh my God, he's a screamer, you know, he made people cry, he's, you know, and you're like, wait, this is the guy I know? So it's interesting. So that makes sense. Again, I just never met Jim, so all I'd heard was
that part of his reputation is overblown because it makes for better copy.
Yes, of course.
Well, this guy is ridiculously proficient. He knows every aspect of filmmaking better than you do.
Better than the crew,
And the people who are the loudest about it are really whiners anyway.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's just the stories here. Like I remember Fincher had a DP that he was doing tests for. I think it was Panic Room. And he shot for 2 weeks doing tests, and he fired the guy. And this guy's I don't remember the name. He's a famous, you know, one of the top DPs. And I was like, what happened? He said he was underexposed. We shot 2 weeks to figure out the film and the lenses and everything, and it was all underexposed. And they're like, he's not doing his job. And I was like, wow, all right. So he wasn't like, he just, you know, didn't like the guy's, you know, attitude. He's just like, why? I gave you 2 weeks to get this right, and you never did. Yeah. I'm like, interesting. I'm never given any of that. I also go like, wow, they give you got to shoot tests. I'm just So that's the rarefied air is like, oh, you get to build study models. We get blueprints if we're lucky. It's more like, here's some wood, build a thing. I mean, I'm talking Muppet schedules and Muppet budgets, but that's interesting. All right, well, there you go. Good to know.
It's a really you know, there's so many different ways to get to a film. Absolutely. And there's so many different approaches. And, you know, what you find is that the biggest thing you have to fight is not ego, it's entropy.
Yeah, so I said physics.
You know, and well, just the emotional physics of people, oh, this is taking too long, I'm going to lose energy as an actor, I'm losing focus, I'm worrying about this and all of these kind of things, you know. Yeah, there's drowning and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it becomes one of those things where, you have to figure out how to keep the momentum, because it's very easy to let the momentum go, because, you've got different departments that are all trying to do their jobs, but some of them prefer to do them sequentially rather than concurrently,
Yeah. Nice.
even when they could be done concurrently.
Right.
And then things just slow down and slow down and slow down. And, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, that was a half an hour ago. What did you want me to do? Because you told me what you wanted back then. And now that I've had six coffees, 4 conversations, and while we were waiting for this other department. So
Ralph Winter is the producer on the Trek movies I worked really closely with in 4. And his thing, like my first, because I was hired as Leonard's assistant, very much like you were Jim's. He's like, you're not my coffee guy. You were the guy it was very, very parallel to that. But then they said, we can't make you, Leonard said, I want to make you an assistant director, but that's an AD, DGA thing. So are you okay with associate producer? I'm like, dude, you can call me Joe Duckman. I don't care. I just love the job and love working with you guys. So Ralph said,
we're known as Joe Duckman.
Joe Duckman, yeah. Well, only on the crew. Like, that's a very deep cut. But Ralph said, not only don't let things slip through the cracks, but it's sort of like the hockey player, Gretzky. Don't go where the puck is, go where the puck's going to be. He's like, see, where are we going to be in half an hour? Where are we going to go next? Be prepared for that, whether it's the script or production or post-production. And that was incredibly helpful, is like, put your head in the space of what we're all doing and what are we going to need. And that's just very simple kind of dictate, but it really helps
anticipate
my needs, but in a good way, of like where, just simple.
Well, it's like also anticipate the film's needs.
Yes, exactly.
I managed to pull off that one at least once on The Abyss, where we had shot as much of the pseudopod sequence as we could, because ILM needed the plates.
Right.
Because at one point, I remember when we were in Gaffney, we got a note from ILM saying, okay, we've gone through all the storyboards and all the stuff that you're going to do, and shooting the scenes and everything, and we realized that, for the shot lengths and stuff, we will not have this rendered until several months after the movie releases. So we're going to need to figure out how to do something about that. And we ended up taking about 45 seconds out of the CG realm.
Wow.
And that was why it's a POV for the first number of shots. And Dennis came up with that brilliant idea of doing it as an optical with, shifting concentric rings and,
rings, yeah.
But that was all going to be, actual shots of the pseudopod. And we cut that out. It cost three or four, maybe more, long shots, hallway shots of it, creeping down the hallway. And so we were having to do all this kind of stuff. And I remember when we got to Harbor Star, after the main shoot, we had shot as much of it, and it's like, okay, we're missing these pieces of coverage for
Harbor
the
Star was a stage facility down in St. Peter.
Okay, all right.
Managed by
He who will not be named.
He who will not be named. But and when we got there, every setup needs time.
Yeah.
So they were doing. It was like, okay, we've got to set up this dry for wet underwater shot here, and we got to set up this other thing, and the crew's just standing around, and Jim's like, what can we do? And I said, hey, don't we have some coverage we owe for the pseudopod sequence? And Jim looked at me and said, brilliant. And he went, because we had pulled the set pieces, and had them kind of in the corner.
Right.
And we threw those together and got these inserts that we needed for the scene. That was one of those anticipate things where we, if Jim didn't think of it, that's the only reason I felt proud of that moment for myself.
Right, yeah.
He was too busy kind of thinking about the other things.
Sure.
That if I could come in there, and that's at one point, Jim started calling me his extra RAM.
Nice.
Which was for me very proud to be able to.
Huge compliment. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So after months and months of working on The Abyss, Van had brought his cabal out to populate the crew a bit with me and Ed Marsh and
Steve Quayle to some
we had
extent.
Steve Quayle, yeah, absolutely. And so Van was instrumental in giving us our start on this movie. And I went off to work with Les Dilley on his next movie, but Ed and Van went off to work on Terminator 2 after that.
Staying with Lightstorm.
So
Yeah.
with Lightstorm that had just been named as Jim's company.
Yeah. Okay, you have 15 minutes to go through the rest of the career.
We're almost up to Terminator 2.
Yeah, I was going to say. So it's about an hour every 2 years. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is
it's great. These are I'm captivated. It's not boring at all. It's just you got a lot to talk about. It's great.
Yeah. Well, Ed and I both ended up in Terminator 2,
working with BJ Rack.
With BJ Rack. BJ actually, I'm trying to think if BJ actually ended up in the movie or not. We ended up actually in the movie, so you can find us in the movie. Okay. And Ed also went on to get a bigger supporting role in Titanic.
Yeah.
He was the videographer in the framing story on board the Keldysh. And Steve Quayle went on to be second unit director on Titanic and then Avatar and now
Terminator. He did the shots of the road.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. I didn't know that. I ended up, getting a title of creative supervisor on T2, as well as I think some. I'm trying to remember if I got what other credit I got, but I went on to produce the special editions for both The Abyss and T2,
So how did you end up at Band for the Ranch? Like, where'd you go from Lightstorm to that? What's that?
Well, that's where it got interesting. On T2 is when I met Mark DePay.
Yes. Because
he and Spaz were kind of the key CG guys working on the T1000.
Yeah.
And and I knew John Knoll because he was 1 year ahead of me at USC.
Oh, okay.
And he worked on The Abyss. Under Dennis, and I remember on The Abyss he had come out. He was there to shoot reflection map photos of our sets, and he said, "Oh, hey, I noticed you're using pixel paint for your thing. My brother and I wrote this little program. Here's version 0.97.
Wow,
it's called Photoshop."
Yeah,
and gave me the program, and it was a revelation because of the things it could do, and of course we all know what happened there.
They've done well, that little company.
Yeah. So I went up over the Christmas holiday, I think it was, to visit with family, and that over the holidays, DePay said, "Hey, some of us are hanging out at ILM. You wanna come over and say hi?" And I had actually, I think I was going to have a lunch. I was going to take, as Jim's emissary, I was going to take Dennis Mirren and Scott Ross, who was general manager at the time, out for lunch. No, actually, it was Dennis and Mark DePay I was taking out to lunch, and that was a whole embarrassing story, because when the check came at the end, and gun comes over, puts out his hand, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm done with the check. I put the check in his hand. I look up, and it's Scott Ross, and he was reaching out to shake my hand, and I put the check in his hand like I thought he was the waiter.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
So that's how things started. But
hence
was
you were
was he wearing the Denny's hat at the time?
Not so much, but no. But Scott and I got along really well too, yeah. For some reason, at one point, he was crediting me for coming up with the name Digital Domain. I don't quite remember that, but anything's possible. But I went up to ILM to visit, and DePay showed me around, took me to the pit and stuff, and he had invited a friend of his who had used to work as a buyer, I think, in the CG department, and that was Casey Cannon. And I met her for the first time while we were. She came in when we were touring the scanning department at ILM and talking to Josh Pines and folks, and I met Casey, and we kind of hit it off, and I didn't hear from her for a while because I had a girlfriend in LA at the time and everything else, but we she would call up every so often and say, hey, I'm working on a project or anything, are you interested? And one of those projects was a concert film that I ended up co-directing with her for a San Francisco band called Voice Farm. And that was like after T2 was finished. And at one of the times I was up in San Francisco during post on T2, she was throwing a party at a friend's apartment in San Francisco City for John Nelson, who was leaving ILM to move to LA. And so I remember sitting, and Casey and I talking for a really long time. So, and then after I was single again, a couple of months later, she called about this Voice Farm concert video, and I ended up, co-directing it and co-editing it with her, and we became a pair, and we've been together for 35 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, and she was one of the folks at the ranch when Mark and Spaz got banned from the ranch for trespassing into George's office. And she thought the name "banned from the ranch" the term was so funny. She said, if I ever start a company, I'm going to call it "Banned from the Ranch Entertainment." And that's exactly what she did. She came down, she moved down to LA to be with me, and we worked on a couple things. We actually did some work. She did some work. Well, I was at Lightstorm. She produced the T2 special edition that I was working on for me while I was writing and doing all the stuff, and she got a job working with Mike Okuda as a graphics designer for Star Trek Generations.
I love Mike.
And I got to help out on a couple of graphics that were in there and stuff, and she helped them get some more Macintoshes in there to work on and stuff. So I was kind of bummed she didn't get a credit on the movie. I was kind of bummed. I don't about that. I don't know
she work with Hammerhead when Mark came down here with Jamie and they created Hammerhead? Was she?
She knew all those guys.
Yeah.
She didn't. I don't think she actually worked at Hammerhead. But,
okay.
And she said, I really want to start Band from the Ranch, a company called Band from the Ranch, and we after doing some of these graphic things, we got hired by the computer consultant that we worked with on back with Jim on some of the T2 stuff and the Abyss stuff was a guy named Mike Backus. And Mike Backus was kind of a all-around consultant guy and things, had a lot of connection with the computer things and computer companies and so on. And he would get companies that were developing things to potentially provide us with materials and things for stuff that we could use behind the scenes in filmmaking. Dave Smith was one of those guys. And he got us a hard drive deal with Jasmine drives.
Oh, wow.
If you really want a deep cut, go back and find a copy of like Mac Week that has a full page ad of Backus and I in our Abyss crew shirts wearing the helmets.
Crew jackets, the ones that I had designed.
Jackets with the helmets, wearing with the helmets in the editing room, where it's basically an ad with me and Backus in it. Anyway, he was married. He was formerly married to Martha Coolidge.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah. back at the time when I knew him. And so he had worked on Real Genius, and that's why it's got all the tech stuff in it and so on. And he brought Casey and I onto a film called Congo.
Oh, okay.
And it said, we know you like doing graphics and stuff, and so Band for the Ranch was hired to do Congo, and I was kind of transitioning out of Lightstorm because Casey was starting this new company, and I wanted to help her out in it. So I was kind of splitting my time between Lightstorm and Band for the Ranch and designing graphics and stuff. And the interesting thing here with the graphics was it was all SGI because they were using SGIs. Yeah. After Jurassic Park, Amblin was and Kennedy Marshall were like, we can get product placement with these guys. They're the ones doing all the CG work in the show. Why not use their systems for this and have these guys come in and do it? And so we ended up doing the screen graphics, not any of the effects graphics, but all the screen graphics we were doing on set live playback because they wanted to do that the same way you do video playback.
Right.
And the idea was it would be higher resolution and you could program the stuff to actually work. So it wasn't just playback and the actor has to time themselves.
Interactive.
Right. You could,
yeah, so we could design interactive stuff. And so that's what we did on Congo. And then they brought us back, Amblin brought us back to do Twister. And then The Relic.
So was this all mainly screen graphics is what you were doing?
It was all screen graphics. We weren't doing shots in the movies.
Right. Did you get to work?
Yeah.
Did you get to work with Tim Curry at all, or he was around on Congo?
Yeah, he was around.
That crazy character he's doing.
Yeah, Homolka. Yeah, but we were doing all the screen graphics, and we started doing interactive screen graphics for things, but we are also doing live video feeds into SGIs for like those bits with the perimeter fence and the motion sensors and the apes coming out of the darkness and all that kind of stuff. And what I realized doing that show was that SGIs are phenomenal processing units, but they can't do video for shit because they are trying to be such higher graphics.
In fact, they can do video for shit.
Yeah, and it was so funny. We finally realized after several shows that the best way to get normal video to run on a full screen on a stream, it would run on SGI, but it only run in a 640 by 480 window. You couldn't blow it up, and which is something we are so used to now.
Yeah.
They couldn't do it. We found out the only way you could really do it was to texture map the video onto a 3D plane, and then zoom in on the 3D, move your camera in on the 3D plane to film it. That was the only way to do it.
Oh my
God. It was the craziest thing. But we had some great guys up at SGI who were working with us who helped build the laptops that we used.
Right.
So they had this device called the Silicon Graphics. I'm trying to remember the name of it now. It was a flat screen that you could use like an overhead projector. It was like a screen.
Oh, it had no back.
Display.
You would project.
It had a back through it. It had a back with a light on it, but you could take the back off and then put it down on a overhead projector.
Wow.
And so what we were able to do was we were able to custom put in brighter lights for the behind the LCDs and be able to build the fake laptops. Those are the infamous fake Silicon Graphics laptops that you see in Twister.
Right. Oh, amazing!
That was the first time that anybody I think had tried to do that.
I remember the days when like you go to SIGGRAPH and SGI was kind of dying because PCs much cheaper with third-party graphics cards. It wasn't all one system. You could put together a system. And that was, what do you think, the mid-90s? Like SGI.
Yeah, it would be late 90s, 90s because
90s.
Congo was in 95, so we were shooting in 94. They were still top of the game. And
I remember their booth at SIGGRAPH was like a block long, and they had the best parties. And
they wanted to get into content, and they wanted to work on more movies to not only be behind the scenes doing the visual effects work. They wanted to be seen on screen for product placement. But the only way that works is they have to be able to work for product placement. And we were, I think, one of the only companies that took the time to figure out how to make their systems work for that.
Right.
And B, it's a pain in the neck to use SGIs for that purpose. It's like, we need to use your Ferrari to do
To haul a trailer.
stunt crashes and haul freight. Exactly.
Right.
And it wasn't built for that. And I remember pissing them off once when they would come into our gold room where we had all of our, they would, on these sets when we're using SGI, they would build, the production would build us a locked room that we would keep all our SGIs into, and then just had cables going out of it because it's expensive stuff. Those were where a CPU, a mid-level CPU for SGI was $40,000.
Yeah.
So we got all these product placement machines. We had to learn how to use IRIX, and to do all this stuff. And I remember because I would have my Macintosh there, I'd be doing graphics, and we'd port them over into the SGI. And I remember pissing them off one day because I had their SGI there. I had this, and I had a sign. Because this is about trying to run 640 by 480 video full screen, and you can do that on Mac very easily because it's a consumer device, but you couldn't do it on SGI. This is before we figured out the thing. Right. And I just put up a sign up on the screen on the SGI with an arrow pointing this way towards my Mac that said, "Why can't you do this?"
Wow.
When the SGI guys came in.
Oh my goodness.
And that spurred them on to try to develop a hack to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, interesting.
So, but some of the folks up there were really great. The marketing guys were really arrogant at SGI because they thought theirs was the
that's
shit.
What I think that was their hubris. Because I remember when PCs were starting to kind of eat away a little bit. They're like, oh, it's like engineers when the Mac first came out. I remember. Yeah. Friend's dad was a computer engineer. He's like, it's just a toy. It's a consumer toy. It's not gonna. And I was like, well, I like it. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and that's right before they started trying to build PCs.
Right.
On their way out, and
they kind of saw the writing on the wall, but they were about 2 years too late. Yeah.
I still have a couple of SGI.
The refrigerators or the
no, the desktops.
The desktops, yeah.
The Indy and the Indigo. I've got
the Indigo.
Each of those because those are the ones we used on the set. You know what it's like trying to create fake laptops with CPUs when we're driving. Let me just give you a quick example on Twister. We're out in 100-degree heat, and they just need to do a simple shot of a laptop inside on the dashboard of a moving vehicle where they're trying to track the tornadoes. Right. And so we've got the truck, we've got our laptop put in there. The laptop has to have two main inputs coming in. One is the power, which has to run through a really long cable, and the other is the data, which they had to make 90-foot data cables with repeaters for us to be able to be off the set running these seemingly handheld laptops. And so we had that in the front of the car with the camera in the back seat pointing at it. Me in the back of the truck with the CPU, a keyboard, and my own kind of mirror monitor.
Right.
And we're trying to drive this thing. And it's all powered by the truck. The picture truck is towing a generator car.
Oh my God.
To drive my computer. And it's 100 and whatever degrees out there. They have to put ND on the windshield to get anything exposure-wise visible on the screen. Right. And they're at like ND 12 on the windshields and the side windows to be able to see anything. It was crazy. And I'm sweating in the back, and my computer's like, it's like, well, what happened? The screen just went up. Oh, the computer overheated. You got to slow down. And they'd pull in the fans attached to the thing and just blow it on the thing until it cooled down enough to reboot. It was
showbiz.
That's
showbiz, baby. So, wow.
Yeah.
So when did you start getting into doing actual effect shots in the movies?
Probably about 96. We started doing. We started, because obviously we're working our way towards that. People weren't really looking at Macs as something that'd be able to do that, but it was like, we can do that. it's getting faster. There were programs coming out that were allowing these kind of
Were you
things.
using Lightwave, or because I know Lightstorm was a big Lightwave user, but
No, Digital Domain was a big Lightstorm.
Digital Domain,
yeah. Lightstorm. While I was there, we were all Mac people, and I never actually learned how to do full-on SGI visual effects. I was always a Mac person, and I really took to After Effects.
Yeah.
But the 3D program we used a lot was Electric Image.
Oh, I was going to say Electric Image, yeah.
Because we had used that on T2. Well, we used that on T2, and I became friends with Jay Roth and the folks that helped develop that. As a matter of fact, one of his guys, whose name I'm blanking on, but he was a fantastic coder. Cyrus Smith, I think is. He was a coder for EI, and he lived in a high school that an abandoned or a unused high school that he bought in Montana, and was living there. Amazing. And he would code SGI, IRIX programming for us for creating graphics on the SGI when we were at band, and it was wild. He was a great guy. And in about 96, when we were doing, 96, 97 was a really interesting time for us, because those years we did Dante's Peak for all the graphics. We did Twister had come out. We were working on Spawn for Spaz and Mark.
Yeah.
That's where Spaz really was getting to be kind of challenging. I mean, I've never had anyone literally poke me in the chest with a finger, except for Spaz.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
For people who don't know, Spaz is the nickname for Steve Williams, who was there's a documentary about him
called Jurassic Punk, which you can watch if you want to. You want to.
So you know who Spaz is. We're not.
Spaz Williams. Yeah.
Correct.
But we got to work on films like this, and Starship Troopers. We did all the graphics for Starship Troopers.
Oh wow!
And then ended up doing some of the composites for I designed the FedNet, the whole "Would you like to know more" thing for that. Kept it real simple, but looking back on it, it's like holy shit, that's basically kind of the internet. Yeah. And we got to work on a lot of these kind of projects. Deep Rising, Steve Summers did visual effects for that. They hired me to design a sequence to kind of solve a plot thing where they wanted to show, that the cruise ship had been taken off course and stuff by these pirates.
Was that John Bruno?
No, I don't think so.
No, you're thinking of Virus.
No, he did a deep sea creature movie too.
Virus.
That was Virus.
Oh, I thought it was. Oh, okay. Anyway.
No, we had when the Abyss was coming out, there was Deep Star 6 and Leviathan.
Leviathan, that was it.
George Cosmatos.
Yeah.
Scary fish. And anyway,
so
that period, the FedNet was something that was really fun to create, and working with Verhoeven. He actually, interestingly, he got a referral for a band for the ranch because he was looking for somebody to do graphics for it. He got it from his fellow Dutchman, Jan de Bont, because we had done Twister. We did, and so that was kind of nice. And we ended up not only working with Verhoeven on Starship Troopers, but also on Hollow Man. We did all the graphics on Hollow Man.
Wow.
So it was really kind of an interesting time. And in that same period, while we were shooting Spawn, I get a call from Jim, or a page from Jim, saying, "Do you want to come down to Mexico for a little bit? I want to put you in the movie." So I end up, taking 2 weeks off from working on Spawn to go down and play a Chinese passenger who gets rescued, and then have that scene get cut out of the movie. But I did end up in the movie for earlier.
It's in the extended version, though.
It is the extended version.
The Chinese passenger version.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Ironically, the special edition producer for the for Titanic, for the DVD and stuff, was me. So I ended up being able to include all that stuff
There
in
you
the
go.
deleted scenes, and then I don't know if it ended up in the actual theatrical release long version, but I do know that they had done and we also did all the effects for the additional scenes, which was mostly adding stars, removing breath for any of the additional pieces and stuff.
Oh, cool.
So it was
And the
great.
Kraken monster.
Yes.
And what were you using? Was it EIS at that time, electric image, or were you Lightwave, or what were you using to do the effects? Even the simpler stuff like that. After Effects.
Actually, we were using After Effects.
After Effects.
But
wow.
when we needed to do 3D stuff, we would use electric image. I was big on
And this was
electric image.
before Adobe bought After Effects. This was when it was still COSA, right?
Adobe, I think, had bought it by that point. But yeah, we were. It was COSA After Effects. We used that for a while, and when it transitioned over to Adobe, we were using it.
I thought Adobe didn't buy them till 2000, or just slightly before. Anyway, doesn't matter.
It's possible. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it was still something I still have some of the dongles, so I guess, yeah. I still have some COSA dongles.
I have a drawer full of dongles for Lightwave and EIS. It's just like, what do you do with them?
Yeah, that electric image is still extant. It's still out there.
I gave up when I went to Lightwave, and then I went to.
Do you remember a great demo that was done by an EI user? I think it was called Made in Japan. It was a giant robot piece that was done to that Mana song.
No.
And it was really well done kind of CG robot, mech robot kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was done by a guy in Brazil named Tomas Egger. And they used it for a lot of their PR for EI. So see what you can do on it. Yeah. Anyway, he became a good friend of mine, and he ended up buying EI from Jay,
right.
And he still runs it.
Wow!
And out of Brazil, it's got obviously a very, very small kind of bespoke user base, but it's still out there.
Is it all Mac? Still Mac only?
It's still Mac.
Wow.
I don't know if he's done a PC version. You should reach him. Look up
that's amazing.
EIAS3D.com. I think.
With the Blender, it's much cheaper.
Not to be confused with someone wearing an Egger suit.
No, it's not.
That's a little Men in Black reference for you.
Yeah,
man.
exactly. Edgar.
Edgar suit. Yeah.
Edgar suit.
Egger.
Yeah. So that's the kind of weirdness I got to go through.
Let's jump to now. What are you doing these days? I know there's more to cover, but just so we kind of wrap up on where are you now?
I am kind of laying low and writing. I've got a bunch of stories and scripts that I've been working on, and doing a lot of little weird freelance things.
You directed a film a couple of years ago.
Oh, I did direct a film a couple of years ago called Cliffs of Freedom that came and went. It's as somebody who loves science fiction and those kind of things, and I figured that my first opportunity was to to kind of co-write and direct a historical romantic melodrama.
Oh, okay.
That takes place in the dawn of the Greek War of Independence in 1821.
Okay.
So
and where would one see that if one wanted to watch it? Is it on Prime?
It is on Amazon, I believe. It may be a rental, but it actually got a theatrical release in 2019 for about a month. So,
last year people went to the movies.
Right. It was a crazy time. But yeah, I spent 4 or 5 years on that movie. Because it's completely independent. It's by somebody who had a lot of money who wanted to do this based on a short story that they had written, and they basically funded this movie, and I got tapped to direct it. It was a connection through Casey, and so
And
we spent a lot of time.
it's really good. It is one of the best independent features I've ever seen.
Wow.
And you should be very proud of it. I'm not kissing your butt, but there you go.
Damn it! Now I owe Darren money again. Every time he,
all our 60 listeners are going to go watch it. You're going to make another $5.
That's right.
Yeah, well, that's the hope. It's interesting. It was one of those things where I tried really hard to make it as best a film as I could, like every filmmaker should, but it was trials and tribulations throughout because it takes place in Greece, so we naturally shot in New Mexico.
Of course.
And you'd be surprised just how well New Mexico played for Greece.
What about the oceans, or just you were never like near the water?
This is a completely inland movie.
I would say if you shot it in New Mexico,
yeah. So because it took place on the middle of the Peloponnese, it wasn't anywhere near the coast. So, but it was a really fascinating experience to try to do it because again, it's if you want to be a filmmaker, you can specialize in genres and stuff, but why not try to dive into the deep end where you don't have the crutch of the concept things beyond a certain point and do a story about characters. That's what I wanted to see.
Talking about being a filmmaker and tools, obviously we've all had our careers using various tools, particularly in computers. Where are you sitting now with all the stuff between, Blender and Unreal Engine for building whatever worlds you want, or CG effects, the After Effects suite? I mean, there's a lot available to independent filmmakers, and there's distribution, which is Prime or Amazon or YouTube. It's daunting in a way. It's because you can do anything and put it out there.
There's no excuse. There's no excuse anymore. You have YouTube, Vimeo, everything.
Yeah. The excuse is I need to make a living. I think that's the biggest excuse most people have is you can't. What's great about being paid to do that is you get paid to do it. Doing your own stuff, which is much more rewarding in a lot of ways, is what are you doing? Either you've saved up money or you have.
Yeah, that's always the challenge. I mean, I'm always looking for projects to work on, while I'm working on my own because.
And are you approached still as are you banned from the ranch?
No, we actually Banned from the Ranch actually closed in 2002.
Yeah, okay.
So it's been a long time.
So you're kind of independent. Someone just called.
Well, there was a whole nother chapter that started, in the midst of all of this, which was the Laserdisc and DVD.
Oh, added features
and special editions, menus and stuff. Business that whole aspect was something I kind of transitioned into after Band closed.
Okay, wow.
And the challenge with Band ultimately came down to economics because, and it happened to Boss Films as well, which is. The prices of the computing is high and then it hopefully goes down. And as it goes down, if you bought before the prices go down and now you're suddenly competing with somebody who bought them when they were, because they went down from like $40,000 a CPU to $8,000.
Yeah.
In their later days.
Yeah.
And we had bought them at the higher price.
Yeah.
And now you can't compete as a small company to go up against. There was a point where we were bidding against companies like Digital Domain and ILM on shows, which was ridiculous because we were a small company. We weren't, going to be able to have that kind of bandwidth, And
was Boss still around? Did they?
No, they closed as well. They ran a situation where they bought millions of dollars worth of equipment before the SGIs, before the thing went down. So we know exactly. I know Richard and he, It was a challenge. It was a challenge because unlike the old stuff, which even as new stuff comes out, you can still use the old stuff.
Right.
Because it's mechanical and it's not, whereas the new stuff, when the computers change, the software has to be upgraded to
Right.
take advantage or to at least be compatible. And
Right.
so the old stuff doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And what's interesting is that I have a lot of projects that I've worked on over the years, whether they be DVD stuff where I did all the Star Wars DVD menus and all the, like 4 or 5 different versions of Terminator 2 for DVD, Laserdisc, Blu-ray,
4K,
whatever.
yeah.
And a lot of the graphics, I do all my stuff on the Macs, and I can't access half of those programs unless I have an old system running the old software before Adobe went subscription and everything.
We ran into the same exact thing doing the Star Trek project 22 years apart. We had done it in the year 2000, and when we had to come back and do it again in 2022, all of our assets were, outmoded, and we had to go to ancient versions of the programs just to output them.
Right.
And it's crazy because the technology goes faster than anything.
Well, at this point, it's
I've got like 9 Mac Tower CPUs from the early 2000s that are just mothballed. So if you guys need to get into your old stuff, I might have.
I have every Mac I've ever owned, from a 512 all the way up to the last cheese grater one, and then I stopped. I just moved into PCs for graphics and stuff because it's just cheaper and
quitter.
But
I'm still a Mac.
I still use Macs for like Photoshop and that, but for 3D, that kind of stuff, it's just, you can upgrade every year or two, get a new graphics card, and the Macs just don't want to do that. It's frustrating. I hate it. I only got my PC a year or 2 years ago now. I finally went. A friend had OS 10. He had Windows 10, and I said, I hated Windows. I tried it, and I was like, I hate the OS. He said, try Windows 10. It's so Mac-like. You're actually be comfortable with it. And I fooled around with it for like an hour, and I'm like, you know what? This isn't too bad. There's still things I hate about it. That I think the Mac is still a better GUI, but it's fine enough to do, like, I work on it.
I mean, every one of these has its pluses and minuses, and we kind of committed to Mac really early. We
I've got 6 of them. From 1985 up till this year. I've got I pretty much upgrade every 3 years to something.
I've got some of my old laptops from like 94.
Oh wow!
So it's pretty crazy, but you hold on to the things that work if you can. And now it's like 25 minutes to boot up some of these old systems. They're trying, I'm still trying to figure out how to pull some of my data off some of these older systems, but it's wild.
Well, talking about older data, Van, you are one of the people
oldest pieces of data
in my memory that has lasted so long. And
you do a lot of things. That's the best way to last this business, is not do one thing. Do a lot of things and do them well.
Van is constantly reworking himself into something more fascinating and interesting. And I'm so glad to know you.
And it's great to finally meet you. Again, I've heard about you since forever, at least since the mid-90s. And so it's nice to finally make your acquaintance, sir.
Well, likewise, sir.
Thanks for being on the show and dealing with all of Darren's nonsense.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Darren's nonsense, helped me get to where I am the same way it works the other way around, I think,
That's great.
And that's really what that's the joy of the business.
Well, yes,
teamwork and hey, I need somebody to do this. Anybody, and
the kind of the below the line camaraderie of especially like you guys were saying, like you find that geeks and nerds and people who have deep dives into stuff that the average person's like, I don't know what you're talking about, and you're quoting lines from the movie. I mean, that's kind of, particularly in the effects business, has always been. When I went to ILM, I felt like, oh my God, I found my people. Because we talk about Harryhausen, you could say Emer and nobody's like, what the hell is that? They knew exactly what you meant.
Exactly.
You could do this and go like, and they go, and you're like, oh, okay, so there are, and it's weird. It was all kind of like lower middle class kids whose families had enough money to have a Super 8 camera and a TV where you could watch, Ray Harryhausen movies on Saturday. And then, I mean, from Ken Ralston all the way down, there was just this.
To you.
To me, yeah.
Yeah.
Down all the way down to me, exactly.
Me as well.
And we all read Mad Magazine. We all liked Famous Monsters. There was this kind of, and that carries on now. I don't know what 20-year-olds talk about that they watched. I guess the movies we made, but there's less of it. I think it's more part of pop culture now than it was. We was a very small niche for our age range.
Yeah,
like you were the weird guy that you could stop motion, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, we were all, united by this common love of these particular types of films or particular types of techniques. And, it was harder and fewer and farther between to try to find people. That's why Darren has been a lifelong friend, and we all still, keep that fire, I think, of liking some of these things, even though it's kind of, like you said, it's gone more mainstream now.
Yeah, I mean, you could get a degree in special effects at an art college, which blew my mind. Yeah,
I wouldn't want to meet those people though.
Well, they're kids who have stars in their eyes and want to make Star Wars just like we did, but they spent a lot of money at a school that basically, I don't know how much.
Well, I also think, here's the thing. I think that the tools have become the kind of stuff we showed our dedication by going the extra distance to do things where there were no tools available, that we had to kind of kludge everything and make it work. And that was part of the thing that impressed the folks that we wanted to impress.
Well, it was all early days in ILM, especially in the creature model shop. You were kind of inventing the way to do things because there wasn't software that goes like, oh yeah, just use Houdini for that. It was like, well, how are we going to do this? And you had to know about gravity tags and just all that stuff it was like being a mad. In fact, one of the gals, I think it was Karen Dubé, said, the creature shop model, you guys are the mad scientists. Because we were kind of just making, like, you had to go, remember Richard Emlin bought like 255-gallon drums of glow juice from Siloam sticks for Poltergeist. It didn't work out, but it was kind of a boondoggle that was referenced for years. But he wasn't crazy. He was like, well, that might work. Let's try it. It turned out not a great idea.
My only official communications with ILM was when I sent up I did a resume kind of booklet called VanFX. With logo and everything. It was mostly about the power loader, my suit, and then the model I did for Jim, and Jim actually wrote a little note for it and everything. And my only interaction with ILM officially in that sense had been I sent up VanFX to ILM and had it sent back to me pretty much unlooked at with a form letter from Karen Dubé.
Oh.
And I just found that in storage recently, so it's like I got to frame this.
She was lovely.
But you eventually got it up to Lauren, didn't you?
I got it up to Lauren, and then Lauren remembered that, and we've become friends since then. As a matter of fact, I did the DVD that goes along with the Sculpting a Galaxy book for Lauren.
Oh, nice.
And so there's I've managed to make a lot of the connections later on, but at the time, of course, I was just another geek like everyone else. You come out of film school. This is one of the great things, you learn. And Darren got to skip this, which is you come out, you pay a lot of money, you go to film school, you come out of film school, and you're like, okay, I just came out of film school. Where's my film to direct?
Yeah.
Because they teach you to want to be a director.
Right. Exactly.
And that's the least.
Unless
least available job.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I have said to anyone who asks how to get in the film business. I said, well, there's two people who get access to everyone and everything on set: the PAs and the producers, and they can keep the director from stuff. But the PAs usually the people who are moving things around. If you want to learn the film business, don't go to film school. And now with YouTube and everything, really don't need to go to film school.
Yeah.
Just go get a job, and like all of us did, get a job, learn, especially when you're young. If you're 35 and you have a wife and a kid and a mortgage, you're screwed. because the pay is terrible. Even now,
Yeah.
I think people are
Well, it's
still
worse
getting-
now. It's worse now.
The best thing about film school that I got to experience, and I think that most people get to experience, is not what you're taught there. It's who you meet there.
Well, yes, it's
and who you have to start your network.
Right.
And
well, but
that is the most important thing to have.
Absolutely. But just starting right out of high school or a year of college, the people you meet are already in the business. If they're Ian.
If you can meet them. That's
Ian
the thing.
Bryce
You can
was
meet
parking
them.
cars. I mean, Ian Bryce is
like the A-Team.
But Ian Bryce was parking cars at the Egg Ranch at Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
And like right after Star Wars, like 78, 79. On Jedi, he was an associate producer. And I think 3 years later, he was producing, I think, Indy 2 or something. Whatever. And he just went out. Now he's a huge producer. I think he retired. Yeah. But all he did, and we were friends because we worked together at the same time on a few things. And his whole thing was just anticipate needs and don't let things fall through. Just basically be good at your job and care more about it than some schmo who's just collecting a paycheck. And that's still true. Well, what you're doing.
Yeah, anyway. But I mean, the challenge is that people are understandably more wary. Because at least if you went through film school, you had to literally pay a price. Whereas nowadays, you say, oh well, all this information's out there. It doesn't mean they've understood it. It doesn't mean they've actually paid attention to it. It doesn't mean there is a lot of stuff out there, but it's also a little overwhelming because it's hard to get straight direction.
It's true
because
you have to
very
be
easy.
Yeah, you have to really kind of have your own
discipline.
Yeah. Or
the easier the path, the less impressive it is that you took it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. I don't even know how you get a job. I mean, I'm so removed from it. I don't know how you get a job. Like, I don't even know where you go except ILM. Like some of the bigger.
Move down to WETA.
Well, I say WETA and ILM. That's kind of it. The digital domain and the boss is gone.
Well, there's still a ton of. There's still a ton of. The folks in London, whether it's Mill or
there's
double negative.
Yeah. But do you just go to art school and learn how to use Photoshop, Houdini, whatever? And there's that, or you go to Art Center. I mean, Art Center cranks out commercial directors.
Yeah.
Or that's what they, were kind of trained to do, like you said.
Yeah. Otis, other places.
Yeah. It's become, and I guess it always was, but in some ways, when we came up through it, you kind of had to be. It was good to be a generalist and have some specific skills, but you kind of had to be a generalist. Now, I mean, there's just people who do texture mapping. That's all they do.
Right.
And that's.
But they're not happy about it.
Well, that's what I mean. I'd be creatively stifling. It's like all I do is push pixels around, and
that's the thing. It's the industrialization of a creative art.
Yes, exactly.
And that's and for some people that's great, but
right.
Some people would rather be leading armies than working with a small collective.
Right.
Band was always a small collective, and we tried to do a little bit of everything, and but there are things we knew we couldn't do, and there are things we knew we could, and that's why I was always more into compositing than I was in 3D, 3D builds and things like that. I preferred to do graphics and the stuff that we were doing in After Effects. You could do some amazing things with 2D material. I mean, if you look at any of the menu work that we've done, we would generate some 3D stuff. I had a great guy I work with, Johnny Banta, who you may know. And he worked with me for many years back in the DVD era, and even on some of the effects and stuff, because we knew how to work together really well and generate, material that looks like it was bespoke, but it was actually work with, using 3D extractions of things and perspective moves on flat images and separations and things like that. So
it's interesting times. This is a whole nother AI, just what AI, I know, you can hate it or love it, but it's here to stay. And I'm not talking about chat. I'm talking just about the visual stuff and people doing the face swapping and all that. And it's getting every month now. I watch YouTube videos, guys who just chronicle this every day. And I mean, it's a revolution on the level of computer filmmaking. You know what I mean? Where just suddenly things that were impossible are doable, and now they're doable for very reasonable prices.
Well, they're being done with a lot of, like you said, with a lot of AI work. I mean, just something as simple as, I mean, one of the keys for what we were doing on the DVDs was projection mapping, and that took work to figure out, oh, okay, we need to build this shape and we can do this shape. And now there are programs where you put in a photograph, and say, make it 3D, and now you can move a camera perspective on it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's doing a bunch of the work.
It's on Facebook. You can take your picture on Facebook and say, make 3D. And it does, I mean, for a crappy little thing that takes 3 seconds, you know, suddenly your background is shifting. It's not great, but again, that's free on Facebook.
Right. But you can't get a development deal from it.
Well, but that's, I don't know if you get a development deal unless you have an IP that people already know. That's a whole other conversation. Is it based on a book? Is it based on a book that sold 1 million copies? Then we're interested. But then I can't afford to get the rights to it. So
I found going through my storage stuff, I found some of the old flow charts, like the LA Weekly did a flow chart about screenwriting.
Oh wow.
You know, that starts with, you know, you've got your script, and then the bottom that everything flows down to was, you never see a dime.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was brilliant.
Well,
because it goes through all the permutations, you know.
We also came up in the 80s when original idea was worth something. And, you know, that's gone the way of the dodo. It's got to be like, that's the biggest thing for me as a creator. I was going to ask, you know, I create original ideas. I don't want to do, unless I read a book, I'm like, that's crazy. I would love to do that with a film. But they just, because it's run by bankers and marketing people, they, you know, you don't get, people are like, how come we don't have these great movies from the 80s like Gremlins and Back to the Future and all that? Because they don't want to take a risk. They don't know, the algorithm doesn't say that'll be a hit.
Which is why we're happy to introduce Weirded Beardos, the movie, brought to you by Bank of America.
There you go. Bank of America. Where America banks.
For banking.
Well, I think that there's still hope for original stuff, but
there is. It's just
the idea is that you have to actually do it because you love it.
Right.
Write stuff, original stuff, because you love it, and that hopefully means that love will, you know, kind of filter into it enough that other people will see it. You're not going to get the ability to you know, write on spec for, you know, for money until, you know, you've got to do it because you love it, because frankly that's the only enjoyment that you can guarantee comes out of the process.
It's the old statement, find what you love and let it kill you.
I've never heard that one.
I got to remember that. That's awesome.
I heard find what you love and you'll, or, you know, do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Well, we're getting that too. So
yeah.
Van, thank you so much for joining us.
It was amazing. That was great.
You're very welcome.
There's so much more to talk about, but we'll do it some other time when we're all...
After you grow a beard. You have to grow a beard and then we'll have you back.
We've got a long time.
I'm Asian. I've never had the ability to grow a beard. The last time I tried to grow a beard, it looked like, what do you have ants on your lip for? You know?
Oh my goodness.
No, seriously, it doesn't grow. It grows out about maybe a 16th of an inch, and then says, "Oh, you're not going to cut us?" Well,
has anyone done a genetic deep dive on why that is? Why there's a particular race that like just doesn't grow? Is it because it was always? I don't know. I can't think of a genetic reason why it would not be useful. Or
you've never seen a gray alien with a beard either. So I'm just saying.
Whoa!
What
are you saying?
Well, there's probably some Chinese fable about you know, the gods basically offered man the ability to grow facial hair or have a brain, or have a bigger brain.
Yeah.
And
definitely, you can see which side I fell.
I just figured that every strand stores memory or data, so I don't have that ability.
It definitely stores food.
Oh my!
Or flavor. All right. And on that note,
thanks everybody for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this talk with Van Ling, Van from the Ranch.
Van from the Ranch, nice.
Thanks everybody,
thanks.
And we'll see you next time. The Weirded Beardos are Kirk Thatcher and Darren Doctorman.
email them at theweirdedbeardos@gmail.com.